Steve, the quiet one, the blocky man in the blue shirt, the first person we ever play as in Minecraft. He opens his eyes in a world full of trees, caves, animals, and strange structures. But there's no one else like him. There are no cities, no crowds, no other humans, just him. And the most mysterious thing? He never speaks, not one word, not even a sound, no voice, no backstory, no memory, just silence. This silence is more than just a game design choice. It feels like a piece of a bigger mystery. Why is Steve the only one who looks like a person? Why does he wake up in a massive world that seems to have been lived in, and then lost? You can walk for days and see strange things. Abandoned, mine shafts deep underground, temples filled with traps, ruined portals, and empty villages with beds and crops. But no builders. It all feels like something, or someone, used to be here. But now, there's only Steve. And through it all, he says nothing. He doesn't cry when he's hurt. He doesn't scream when he's on fire. He doesn't laugh when the sun rises. After a long, scary night, he just keeps moving, keeps building, keeps surviving, like he's been doing this forever. Or maybe like he doesn't even know what else to do. Some people say he's just a game character, and yes, that's true, on the surface. But even that has a story. In early versions of Minecraft, Steve wasn't called Steve. He was just called Player, a nameless figure created by the game's developer, Marcus Persson, as a default skin. But fans gave him a name, Steve, and Mojang made it official. They later added Alex, another default character, but she's just as silent. No one tells you who they are. No origin, no voice, no story. That's silence. It starts to feel like a message. Steve is a mystery. He is strong, stronger than any human. He can break solid wood with his fists. He can carry stacks of stone, diamonds, and gold. He can fall from cliffs, get hit by arrows, be set on fire, and he still comes back. He respawns again and again, like death is just a nap. That's not normal. That's not human. So what is he? A god? A machine? A clone? A ghost? The theories are endless. Some say he's the last of an ancient race. Others say he's the first of a new one. Some say the world he's in was destroyed by a great war or some disaster, and he's the only survivor. Others say he's not from this world at all, that he was sent here to restart life from scratch. And all the while, he never tells us anything. Maybe that's the point. Maybe Steve is silent so that we can speak through him. When you play, you are Steve. His hands become your hands. His world becomes your story. That's what makes Minecraft different. It doesn't give you a script. It gives you tools. It gives you a world full of silence and mystery, and lets you choose what to do. Do you build a farm? A castle? Do you fight the dragon? Or do you just walk, explore, and watch the sunset? Steve doesn't guide you. He doesn't judge. He just listens. But even so, his silence isn't empty. It's full of questions. Why are the villagers so simple? Why do they only grunt? Why are there abandoned structures everywhere? What were the ruined portals for? Who built the strongholds with the strange end portals inside? These things feel like they were made by people. People like Steve. So where did they go? And why did they leave everything behind? Steve never gives answers. But maybe he's looking for them too. Maybe every day he explores, every block he places is part of a search. A search for who he is, where he came from, and why he's alone. And maybe he isn't completely alone. After all, there are strange beings out there. Endermen who act, oddly, like they're remembering something. They pick up blocks. They don't attack unless you look them in the eyes. They teleport away as if afraid. Some fans believe Endermen were once humans, maybe even builders, twisted by time, magic, or another dimension. And when you think about it, they're the only other creature in the game that resembles Steve. Long arms, human-like posture, but broken, warped, silent, just like him. Is he one of them, or the last one who remained whole? The more we play, the more it feels like Steve is part of a forgotten story, one we're discovering piece by piece. He may be silent, but the world he walks through is full of whispers: broken villages, lost temples, endless oceans hiding shipwrecks. Every clue feels like a memory waiting to be found. Steve walks through this forgotten world like a ghost who doesn't know he's a ghost, or maybe like a god, quietly rebuilding what was lost. In the end, Steve's silence might be his most powerful trait, because it lets us wonder, it lets us imagine, and it makes him feel bigger than just a video game character. He becomes a symbol of something more, of rebuilding, of surviving, of being alone but still moving forward. He starts with nothing, but look what he creates. Farms, cities, worlds, entire adventures, all in silence. So who is Steve? We don't know yet, but this is only the beginning. One thing's for sure, behind those quiet eyes and blocky steps is a story waiting to be uncovered. One block at a time. Steve is the only human-like character in the entire Minecraft world. When the player spawns in a new world, there are animals, monsters, villagers, and natural structures, but no other humans. No other characters with the same model, intelligence, or abilities. This fact alone raises one of the biggest questions in Minecraft lore. Where is everyone else? Why is Steve alone in a world that clearly used to be inhabited? Throughout the world, there are many signs that a civilization existed long before the player arrived. For example, you can find strongholds, huge underground stone fortresses made of materials like stone bricks, cracked stone, mossy variants, and libraries with bookshelves. These are not natural. They were clearly built by someone. Strongholds also contain end portals, which are gateways to another dimension. These portals are surrounded by silverfish spawners and end portal frames that require Eyes of Ender to activate. The fact that these structures exist means someone understood how to access the end and had the technology to build portals, something far beyond the capabilities of the current villagers. Next, we have desert temples and jungle temples. These are filled with traps and hidden loot chambers, using redstone mechanisms, meaning the builders understood redstone engineering. But again, they are abandoned. No one guards them. They sit in silence, half buried in sand or hidden under jungle. Leaves. There are abandoned mineshafts deep underground. These are long wooden tunnel systems with support beams, minecart tracks, and sometimes even minecarts with chests inside. Some are infested with cave spider spawners, and most are broken down or partially collapsed. Someone dug these mines. Someone built the tracks. But no workers remain. Above ground, villages still exist, populated by villagers. But villagers are not like Steve. They have limited behavior. They trade, farm, and breed, but they do not build or explore. Villagers don't use complex tools. They don't mine or craft, and they clearly didn't build the strongholds or temples. In fact, their houses are extremely basic compared to what the ancient structures show. This suggests that villagers are descendants of a more advanced civilization, but their intelligence has either regressed over time or they were never the original builders to begin with. Another mysterious clue is the existence of ruined portals scattered across the overworld. And nether. These are broken nether portals made with crying obsidian and netherrack, often half buried in terrain. Many are surrounded by loot chests containing golden armor or enchanted items, hinting that these portals were once active and used by people, but now they are ruined. Why? Was there a disaster? A war? Or did the builders simply vanish? In the nether, you'll find bastions and nether fortresses. Bastions are massive, complex structures made of black stone, gold blocks, and lava, guarded by piglins. These creatures are semi-intelligent. They wear armor and use weapons, but they behave more like mobs than humans. Nether fortresses are long bridges and towers built from nether bricks, with blaze spawners and wither skeletons. Once again, no actual builders remain, only hostile mobs. Yet these structures show planning, defense systems, and organized layouts, all signs of a long-lost civilization. Then there's the end dimension. After activating an end portal, the player is transported to a strange, dark world filled with obsidian pillars, the Ender Dragon, and end cities. These cities are made from purple blocks and end stone bricks. They contain elytra, shulker boxes, and treasure. There are also ships floating in the air, complete with brewing stands and dragon heads. The structures are symmetrical and complex. But once again, no people, only shulkers, which behave more like living chests than sentient beings. So who built the cities? All this leads to one consistent idea in Minecraft theory. There was once an advanced civilization in the Minecraft world. This civilization understood redstone, portal travel, enchanting, architecture, and dimensional exploration. They built across the overworld, Nether and End. But for some unknown reason, they disappeared. Now Steve is the only one left who can rebuild. He can craft, mine, farm, enchant, travel dimensions, just like the ancient builders probably did. Some players believe Steve is one of them, maybe the last survivor. Others think Steve is a clone or resurrected version of one of the original builders. His ability to respawn and carry massive amounts of material suggests he's more than human, possibly engineered or powered by something unnatural. A more chilling theory is that Steve may have been created after the fall of the builders, like a failsafe. Maybe he was programmed to restart civilization. Or maybe he's just the memory of the past, doomed to walk the world alone, rebuilding something he doesn't fully remember. The game never gives us a clear answer, but the signs are everywhere. Empty structures, broken portals, silent cities in other dimensions. All of them suggest one thing: Steve is alone because the world is broken. Something happened to the builders. A war, a disease, or a magical event, and only the traces remain. The villagers are not the answer. The mobs are not the answer. The only one capable of understanding this world and putting it back together is Steve. That's what makes his loneliness so important to the lore. It's not just quiet gameplay, it's part of the story. Minecraft gives you no cutscenes, no narration, no history book. But through what's left behind, through structure, behavior, and mechanics, it tells a deep story. A story of a world that once was, and a character who now walks its empty ruins, trying to bring it back to life. Steve is no ordinary person. From the moment the game begins, his abilities far surpass those of any normal human. He can punch down entire trees with his bare hands. He can break stone, dig tunnels, and carry hundreds of blocks of material without slowing down. He survives long falls, swims across oceans, walks through lava with enchanted gear, and fights armies of monsters without fear. And when he dies, he simply comes back, again and again. These powers are not just gameplay mechanics. They are hints, clues that Steve might not be a man at all, but something greater, something with the strength, endurance, and abilities of a god. Let's look at what Steve can physically do. First, the most obvious, he can punch down a tree. In the real world, even the strongest human couldn't do that. Yet Steve does it with ease, and he doesn't stop there. He moves to stone, obsidian, and ancient debris. With the right tools, he can mine some of the hardest materials in the Minecraft universe. He doesn't tire, he doesn't need rest, and he doesn't suffer from exhaustion. There are no stamina bars, no weight limits. He just keeps going, non-stop. Then there's his inventory. Steve can carry 36 slots of items, each with up to 64 blocks. That's 2,304 blocks total. If each block of stone weighs about 2,500 kilos, roughly, the density of real-world stone, Steve would be carrying over 5 million kilograms of weight. And that's without slowing down. He can sprint, jump, and swim while carrying literal tons of material. No normal human, not even a machine, could do that. He also has superhuman durability. Without armor, he can survive a fall from 20 blocks high. That's roughly 2 stories in the real world, enough to break bones or kill a normal person. With armor, he becomes nearly unstoppable. Netherite armor lets him walk through fire and lava. Enchantments give him resistance to explosions, projectiles, and more. With a shield and the right gear, Steve can face waves of mobs, including skeletons, with bows, creepers, spiders, and even the Wither, and still come out alive. And then there's the respawn mechanic. When Steve dies, he comes back at a bed or at the world's spawn. There's no in-universe explanation for this. It just happens. In most games, respawning is just a feature. But in Minecraft, it feels like it's part of the lore. Steve cannot die permanently. Even in hardcore mode, where the player is locked out after death, it's not because Steve's soul is gone. It's because the world doesn't allow you to return. In multiplayer, Steve's endless respawning makes even less sense from a human perspective. He appears to be a being that cannot truly die, at least not in a permanent sense. He also controls magic and enchantments. Steve can combine experience points with enchanted books and items to create gear with powers like fire resistance, sharpness, or infinite arrows. He can craft potions that increase strength, heal instantly, or grant invisibility. He builds beacons, massive pyramids of rare materials that grant effects like speed and regeneration. Where does this power come from? How does he know how to use it? The villagers don't enchant. The mobs don't. Only Steve can harness and control this mysterious energy. Then we have the End and the Nether. Steve can travel between dimensions. He builds portals that warp space and time. He walks into a purple, swirling frame made of obsidian and appears in another realm. In the Nether, he navigates a harsh, burning world filled with lava, strange creatures, and ruined castles. In the End, he faces the Ender Dragon, one of the most powerful beings in the game, and defeats it alone. He then explores End cities, loots magical gear, and finds elytra wings that let him glide through the air like a god. No other creature in Minecraft does any of this. Villagers stay in their towns. Zombies wander aimlessly. Piglins are stuck in the Nether. Even Endermen, who can teleport and pick up blocks, don't build or explore. Steve is unique. He alone can cross dimensions, fight monsters, mine ancient blocks, craft powerful gear, and respawn endlessly. This combination of abilities suggests he is not just powerful, he may be the most powerful being in the Minecraft universe. So where does this power come from? Some theories suggest Steve was part of the ancient Builder civilization, the same people who constructed the strongholds, mineshafts, and temples. Maybe he was their king, their champion, or their final hope. Others believe Steve is a creation, like a golem, designed to restore or protect the world after the builders vanished. That would explain his inhuman strength and his mission-like behavior. Another idea is that Steve is the player's soul, placed into a body within the world. His strength then comes from you, the player, controlling him from the outside. In that theory, Steve is only a vessel. There's also the idea that Steve is a god, not in a mythological sense, but as a being with complete mastery over the world. He can shape the land, summon lightning with commands, fly in creative mode, and control time and weather. While some of these features are game tools, they represent powers no one else has. He is the one who creates and destroys. In that view, Steve isn't just powerful, he's the god of this world. Of course, Minecraft never confirms any of this. It gives you the tools, the abilities, and the silence. It never says why Steve is so strong or where his powers come from. But that silence creates mystery. And the deeper you look, the more it seems that Steve isn't just a survivor. He's a being beyond our understanding. Whether he's a god, a clone, a machine, or a memory of the past, one thing is clear. Steve is not ordinary. His strength tells us that. His power is part of the story, even if the story is never told directly. In the end, Minecraft gives us a world to shape, survive, and explore, and Steve is the tool through which we do it. His godlike powers don't break the story. They are the story. A lone being, walking the ruins of a lost world, building again from nothing, with strength no one else has. Death in Minecraft doesn't work like death in the real world. When Steve dies, whether it's from falling, lava, drowning, mobs, or even the Ender Dragon, he comes back. Instantly. He respawns at his bed, or the world's spawn point, ready to continue as if nothing happened. His memories are intact. His skills don't fade. His abilities remain. In most games, this mechanic is treated simply as a way for players to keep playing. But in Minecraft, the respawn system opens the door to something much deeper. What if it isn't just a gameplay feature? What if it's part of the story? What if Steve isn't just strong or skilled, but truly immortal? Let's first look at what respawning really means. When Steve dies, he loses his inventory, unless game rules say otherwise, but his body reappears at a spawn point. There is no explanation in the game for why this happens. No god, no machine, no natural system explains how he returns. Yet he does, every time. In real life, death is final. In most games, death is a reset. But in Minecraft, death is just a moment, a break, something that can be undone. This makes Steve different from every other entity in the game. Mobs don't respawn individually. If a zombie dies, it's gone. If a creeper explodes, that's it. Even bosses like the Ender Dragon only come back if special rituals are performed. But Steve, he dies and reappears like nothing happened. This places him in a unique category. Some players believe this means Steve is a kind of immortal being, and his respawning is tied to the world's core rules, almost like the world itself is protecting him. Others think that Steve has access to forgotten builder technology, maybe old systems left behind by a powerful civilization. Perhaps the same people who created end portals, enchantments, and dimension travel also developed ways to prevent death. If so, Steve could be using ancient tech he doesn't even understand, something hidden deep in the code of the world, still running long after its creators vanished. Another angle is the idea of the player as soul theory. According to this idea, Steve is not just a body, he's a vessel. You, the player, are the real mind behind him. You control him from another plane, from outside the Minecraft universe. Every time he dies, your presence simply re-enters the body, respawning it. This would explain why death is not permanent. The body is damaged, but the soul, you, remains untouched. You simply return and keep going. From this view, Steve isn't immortal on his own. It's the player's consciousness that gives him his power, almost like a form of possession or reincarnation. There's also the hardcore mode mystery. In hardcore, when Steve dies, he doesn't come back. The world is locked. Either you get kicked into spectator mode, or you lose access entirely. Some fans see this as a clue that the world decides when Steve can respawn. In normal survival, the world allows him to return, but in hardcore, the world doesn't. This could imply that the respawn mechanic is not something Steve controls, but something granted, either by the game world itself or by something deeper, like a universal force or old system running in the background. Another possible explanation comes from the Totem of Undying, a rare item dropped by evokers. When held in hand, it prevents Steve from dying once. The totem flashes, spins, and keeps him alive with a burst of magic. This shows that the game acknowledges death as something real, and that there are magical forces capable of preventing it. If one item can stop death once, what if something much more powerful is stopping it all the time? What if Steve is linked to a permanent totem, invisible, ancient, and automatic? Some even believe that respawning is a curse, not a gift. In this darker view, Steve is stuck in an endless loop. No matter what happens, he can't leave the world, he can't die permanently, and he can't escape. He's forced to rebuild forever, to walk alone in a world that resets itself. His death is just a pause. He loses his items, maybe feels the pain, but then he's dragged back into the world again and again. This theory compares Steve to mythological figures like Prometheus, punished with eternal life and suffering. There are also connections to the End Dimension. After Steve defeats the Ender Dragon, he sees the mysterious End Poem, a long piece of hidden text that appears after beating the game. The poem speaks of the player and the dream and talks about the universe watching itself through Steve's eyes. It says, "The player is you." This poetic but cryptic message hints that Steve is more than a game character. He is a reflection of a bigger being. The poem also mentions that time and death are illusions in this world. That line alone adds fuel to the theory that Steve's death doesn't matter, because time doesn't work the same here, and he's more of an idea than a person. So what does this all mean? Is Steve immortal because of forgotten technology? Is he powered by the player's mind? Is he a god, a ghost, or just a tool used by the world to rebuild itself? Minecraft never tells us. That's part of its genius. The game leaves space for interpretation. It gives you mechanics, like respawning, and lets your imagination fill in the rest. And when you really look at it, respawning isn't just a feature to make the game easier. It's one of the strongest pieces of evidence that Steve is not human. He is something more, something different, something designed to last. Whether you see it as a gift, a power, or a curse, the ability to return from death makes Steve unique. In the Minecraft universe, he's not like the villagers, or the mobs, or the bosses. He's the only one who gets up again, the only one who restarts the story, who remembers, who rebuilds. And maybe that's what he was made for. To walk the ruins of a forgotten world and to never stop, not even when he dies. In Minecraft, Steve is the only character with full agency and intelligence. The rest of the world, mobs, villagers, creatures, and even bosses, are all limited by narrow behavior patterns. Steve, on the other hand, is capable of building, strategizing, adapting, and surviving across all three dimensions of the Minecraft universe: the overworld, the nether, and the end. This chapter examines the relationship between Steve and the game world around him, and why the design of the game suggests Steve is fundamentally different, possibly superior, to everything else in it. From a mechanics standpoint, Minecraft's world is hostile by default. After sunset in the overworld, hostile mobs begin to spawn. Zombies target villagers and the player. Skeletons shoot arrows from long range. Spiders attack based on light levels, and creepers silently approach before exploding. These mobs have a clear focus, seek, and attack. Their behavior is predictable and static. Zombies attempt to break doors and are drawn to villagers. Skeletons try to maintain distance. Endermen only attack if looked at directly. These behaviors never change. Over time, Steve, however, changes constantly. Starting from nothing, he learns to craft tools, mine resources, and construct defenses. While mobs repeat basic patterns, Steve responds dynamically. If zombies break doors, he replaces them with trapdoors or fences. If skeletons shoot from range, he crafts shields or uses terrain for cover. This strategic difference highlights Steve's unique status. He is not just a participant in the game. He is the only actor capable of adapting to and overcoming environmental threats through intelligence and creativity. Villagers serve as another comparison point. They interact with basic mechanics like farming, sleeping, and trading. However, villagers cannot mine, defend themselves, or change their structures. They rely on Steve for protection via golems or walls. This supports the theory that Steve is either the last remnant of a more advanced race, possibly the ancient builders, or a being designed to interact with the world in a way no one else can. Villagers are passive, mobs are hostile. Steve is the only proactive entity. Beyond the overworld, this pattern continues. In the nether, hostile creatures such as piglins, ghasts, blazes, and magma cubes dominate the environment. Piglins can be bartered with and have rudimentary item usage, But they are still guided by narrow rules. They attack unless the player wears gold. They don't mine, build, or explore. Steve, on the other hand, is capable of surviving the Nether by constructing bases, setting respawn anchors, and using resources like potions and enchantments to handle the hostile terrain. Nether fortresses and bastions, massive pre-built structures, show evidence of advanced civilization, yet no creature there uses these places in a meaningful way. Steve is the only one who studies them, explores them, and repurposes them. In the End Dimension, the same logic applies. The Ender Dragon is a powerful boss, but it behaves on a loop. It flies in circles, attacks predefined targets, and regenerates health from crystals unless the player destroys them. Endermen inhabit the End, but once again, their behavior is extremely limited. They teleport, pick up blocks, and attack players who look at them, but they don't build or interact with the End cities. Steve, however, defeats the Ender Dragon, uses the gateway portals to reach End cities, retrieves Elytra, and brings shulker boxes back into the overworld. This makes him the only entity who moves resources and knowledge across dimensions. Steve is not only the world's most advanced survivor, he is also the only one capable of technological and magical advancement. He uses crafting tables, furnaces, brewing stands, enchanting tables, anvils, and redstone mechanisms. He builds farms, redstone machines, and contraptions. No other creature even approaches this level of complexity. Iron golems protect villages, but are crafted by Steve. Wolves and cats can follow and defend, but only with Steve's input. The entire tech tree of the game is designed for one user, Steve. Combatability is another key point. Mobs increase in difficulty, but their behavior does not scale. Steve counters every enemy using tools, armor, potions, ranged weapons, and enchantments. For example, skeletons are countered with shields, zombies with knockback, blazes with fire resistance, and endermen with pumpkins or boats. Boss mobs like the Wither require preparation, but Steve can defeat them alone. The Wither destroys blocks and attacks anything that moves, but it still follows a pattern. The player is the only entity able to build the environment to trap or control the Wither. Steve has the ability not just to fight, but to manipulate the battlefield itself. What makes this more than just gameplay is that there is in-world logic to support it. The strongholds, mineshafts, ruined portals, and end cities all suggest that someone once had this level of intelligence before. These ancient builders could mine, craft, enchant, and travel across dimensions. The same things Steve does, villagers cannot, piglins cannot, endermen do not. This raises the theory that Steve is either a descendant, a clone, or a remaining member of that lost civilization. He has the knowledge, or at least the instincts, to do what they did. One final point is that the world actively resists Steve's progress. Hostile mobs only spawn at night or in darkness. This forces Steve to use torches, light sources, or strategic building. Creepers silently destroy builds. Skeletons stay at distance. Pillager patrols and raids, specifically, target the player and villagers. These events don't happen randomly. They are triggered or directed towards Steve's location. The game world behaves as if Steve is the central disturbance, and the world is trying to stop him from reshaping it. From a lore perspective, this suggests Steve is not meant to be part of the current ecosystem. His intelligence, creativity, and adaptability are not shared by anything else. He is an outlier, or perhaps a reactivated part of a long-dormant system. Every mob type is static and predictable. Steve is dynamic. That's why he is the only one capable of changing the world, not just surviving in it, but transforming it completely. In conclusion, Steve versus the world is not just about danger, it's about contrast. The world operates under simple, repeating rules. Steve is the exception. He is the only character with memory, logic, strategy, and mastery over time and space. Whether he is a remnant of a forgotten race, a divine entity, or a creation designed to rebuild the world, his unique role is clear. The The world is full of threats and limitations, but Steve breaks all of them. That's not just a gameplay mechanic, it's a central part of the Minecraft mythos. One of the most important pieces of evidence in Minecraft's hidden lore comes from the structures scattered across all three dimensions of the game: the overworld, the nether, and the end. These structures are not natural formations. They are clearly designed and built by intelligent beings. They include temples, fortresses, portals, mine shafts, bastions, and cities. But the world today is empty. No humans remain. Only Steve shows the capacity to build, mine, and craft at this scale. So the question becomes, who built all of this? And what can these ruins tell us about the lost civilization that came before? Let's begin with the strongholds. These massive underground complexes are made of stone bricks, including cracked and mossy variants. They contain spiral staircases, jail cells, empty libraries filled with cobwebs, and long corridors. Most importantly, they hold end portals, structures made with end portal frames, which require Eyes of Ender to activate. The fact that these portals exist suggests the builders had access to the end dimension. These aren't random blocks. They are placed deliberately, following the same layout in every stronghold. This implies shared knowledge and a blueprint, signs of a complex and organized civilization. The libraries add even more to the mystery. Filled with books and sometimes rare loot, they suggest the builders were literate, kept records, and valued knowledge. But all the shelves are empty. Nothing is readable. Whatever information they once held is gone or hidden. Next, there are desert temples and jungle temples. Desert temples are symmetrical sandstone structures that contain hidden chambers filled with loot guarded by a TNT trap. Jungle temples are made of cobblestone and mossy stone and include redstone puzzles that unlock hidden doors. Both use redstone, a form of Minecraft's in-game technology. This tells us that the builders not only used basic tools but understood how to create traps and mechanical systems. Villagers do not build these. Zombies do not. Only Steve uses redstone today, which suggests he is connected to the builders in some way, either by blood, memory, or function. Mine shafts are another important structure. These long underground tunnels are supported by wooden beams and scattered with rails, minecarts, and torches. They are partially collapsed, overrun with mobs, and often contain cave spider spawners. Someone clearly dug these out to gather resources. The presence of minecarts and rails means they use transportation systems, likely to move ores or materials. But again, they're abandoned. No workers remain. This implies either a disaster forced the miners to leave, or the civilization itself collapsed entirely. Since these tunnels go deep underground and sometimes overlap with strongholds, it's likely the same civilization built both. In the Nether, we find nether fortresses and bastions. Nether fortresses are large bridges and towers made of nether bricks. They contain blaze spawners and nether wart farms, meaning whoever built them understood potion brewing. Since blaze powder and nether wart are required for brewing stands and potions, these structures prove the builders had magical knowledge. But the only current inhabitants are blazes and wither skeletons. Hostile, mindless mobs that show no signs of construction ability. Bastions are massive blackstone fortresses, inhabited by piglins. While piglins wear armor, trade, and sometimes patrol in groups, they do not build or modify their environment. The architecture of bastions is far more advanced than anything piglins do on their own. Inside are treasure rooms, gold blocks, and banners, all suggesting a civilization that valued wealth, power, and possibly military strength. Since piglins are not native to the overworld, some fans believe they may have once been part of the ancient civilization and were corrupted over time, possibly due to exposure to the nether or some kind of magical event. The construction quality of bastions is high, implying centralized planning and long-term settlement. Ruined portals are also key evidence. Found both in the overworld and the nether, these broken obsidian frames are often surrounded by crying obsidian, netherrack, magma blocks, and loot chests. Some are partially buried or overgrown. The fact that they appear in both dimensions implies that travel between the worlds was once common. They are not natural, they are intentionally placed, but they are damaged or incomplete, suggesting they were destroyed or fell into disuse. Ruined portals may mark key travel routes of the ancient builders, or they could be escape routes from a world-ending event. Finally, there are the End cities and End ships, which appear after defeating the Ender Dragon and traveling through End. Gateways. End cities are constructed from purpur blocks and End stone bricks, and include shulker guards and loot chests with enchanted gear. End ships contain elytra wings, dragon heads, and brewing stands. These are some of the most advanced structures in the game, indicating a society capable of flight, dimensional travel, and long-distance exploration. But again, no builders are left. Only shulkers remain, which act more like living turrets than intelligent beings. This implies the cities are ancient and uninhabited, like everything else. Across all three dimensions, the same pattern appears. Large, well-planned structures made by intelligent beings, now empty. Mobs now occupy the ruins, but they do not maintain or understand them. Villagers live simple lives, but do not interact with the ancient architecture. Only Steve recognizes these structures, understands their uses, and interacts with them meaningfully. This raises a major lore theory, that Steve is either a descendant, an artificial being created by the builders, or a preserved consciousness, awakened long after the fall of civilization. The structures themselves provide the timeline. First, a civilization developed in the overworld. They dug mines, built villages, created temples, and activated redstone. Then, they expanded into the Nether, constructing fortresses and bastions. Finally, they discovered the End, built strongholds, with portal access, and established cities. At some point, everything collapsed. Whether through war, natural disaster, magic, or dimensional corruption, the world was left in ruins. Steve appears afterward, either as a remnant, a reboot, or a survivor. Minecraft's game mechanics never give direct lore, but the structures left behind act as environmental storytelling. No books, no NPC dialogue, just ruins, patterns, and player observation. Steve's ability to use these structures, activate portals, and continue the builder's work is not just a gameplay function. It's a sign that he's meant to inherit this world. He is the only one with the knowledge and skills to rebuild. Endermen are one of the most mysterious creatures in the entire Minecraft universe. They are tall, black, humanoid figures with glowing purple eyes who can teleport, pick up blocks, and become hostile when looked at directly. Unlike most mobs, in the game, Endermen do not make sounds resembling animals or monsters. Instead, their audio is distorted and glitchy, giving the impression of something not entirely natural. They appear in all three dimensions, the overworld, the Nether, and the End, and their behavior does not change based on location. This universal presence combined with their unique abilities suggests a deeper lore connection, possibly tying Endermen to Minecraft's ancient civilization or dimensional history. One of the most widely accepted theories in the community is that Endermen are the evolved or corrupted descendants of the ancient builders. The reasoning behind this theory begins with the fact that Endermen behave unlike any other mob. Most mobs have simple attack patterns, exist only in specific biomes or dimensions, and do not interact with blocks beyond pathfinding. Endermen, however, can pick up blocks like dirt, sand, gravel, flowers, and some natural materials, and place them in other locations. This behavior is eerily similar to the core mechanic of the player, block manipulation, which only Steve and Enderman share. Their humanoid form and long arms also set them apart. If the builders once had access to the End dimension and built the End cities, it's plausible that some of them were transformed by its effects or by the Ender Dragon's influence. Over time, they may have lost their language, purpose, and identity, becoming the silent and unsettling Endermen we know today. Their behavior adds further support to this theory. Endermen teleport frequently, especially when taking damage or approaching water, which they avoid entirely. This aversion to water is unique and unexplained in mob logic. If they were once human, it could represent a side effect of their transformation. Another unusual trait is their hostility trigger. They only become aggressive when directly looked at. This is not based on proximity or damage like other mobs. It resembles cultural behavior. Some interpretations suggest that in their former state, direct eye contact was a sign of aggression or disrespect, possibly tied to rituals or social norms from when they were still sentient. This idea aligns with the theory that Endermen retain faint echoes of intelligence or culture, even if they no longer communicate. The End dimension itself strengthens the connection between Enderman and the ancient builders. After the Ender Dragon is defeated, players can explore End Cities, which are tall, structured buildings made of purpur blocks and endstone bricks. These cities contain banners, loot chests, shulkers, and sometimes airships with elytra wings. Yet no builders remain. Only Endermen are found wandering the islands, and they do not use the cities or interact with the loot. If they didn't build these structures, who did? The most likely explanation is that the ancient builders constructed these cities during an expedition to the End, possibly seeking resources, knowledge, or escape from the overworld or nether. Something happened during their time in the End. Whether exposure to void energy, magical corruption, or a war with the Ender Dragon, that transformed many of them. Those who didn't escape were changed forever, losing their ability to speak, create, or remember their purpose. This also explains why Endermen are found in the overworld and nether. They may still be searching for something. Some players theorize they are attempting to reconstruct their past, or trying to return to places they once knew. Their habit of moving blocks could be part of an instinct left over from their past. As builders, they don't place blocks with purpose now, but perhaps once they did. Their teleportation suggests they still have access to dimensional abilities, although they no longer build or use portals. They are scattered across the world, like echoes of a forgotten era. Another clue comes from the End poem, which appears after defeating the Ender Dragon. The poem is written in a cryptic, philosophical style and speaks about the player as a part of a greater dream or simulation. It mentions how the player and the universe watch each other, how the player is the center of perception and change. Some lines in the poem discuss forgotten memories and beings that once had understanding but lost it. Although the poem never mentions Endermen directly, it may be referencing them. Beings who once saw the world clearly, but now wander it in silence, holding on to fragments of what they used to be. The poem also talks about the player waking up and continuing the game, suggesting that Steve has a unique role in the world, possibly connected to what the Endermen used to be. Furthermore, Endermen drop Ender Pearls upon death, which are used to craft Eyes of Ender. These items are required to activate the End portal and reach the End dimension. In other words, the only way to access the End is by killing the very beings who seem to belong to it. This could imply a circular connection. The Endermen protect the portal and the knowledge within, but they are also the gatekeepers to it. They may be instinctively guarding the remnants of their civilization, not knowing why. Their silence is perhaps the most haunting clue of all. Endermen do not speak. They don't communicate with each other or the player. Their sounds are warped, as if they're speaking a broken language or trying to remember how to speak. If they were once sentient beings, this loss of communication represents a major part of their fall. In a world where mobs groan, hiss, or moan mindlessly, the Endermen's eerie, stuttering noises feel almost intentional, like corrupted data or glitched memories. In summary, the Endermen behave too intelligently and uniquely to be just another hostile mob. Their structure, behavior, block interaction, and presence in multiple dimensions suggest that they are connected to Minecraft's ancient builder civilization. Whether they were corrupted during exploration of the End, cursed by the dragon, or exposed to dangerous energy, they appear to be fragments of a once great people. Steve, the player, may be the last functional member of that civilization, the only one who remembers how to build, travel, and think freely. The Endermen, then, are what remains of the rest. Silent, wandering, broken, but still holding onto the blocks of the world they once shaped. When looking at Minecraft as more than just a sandbox game, a deeper question emerges. Where does Steve fit into the world's history? We know he is the only intelligent, adaptable humanoid left in the game. We also know the world is filled with ruins, strongholds, abandoned mineshafts, end cities, nether fortresses, all signs of a long-lost advanced civilization. Villagers are not advanced, mobs do not build. Endermen might be remnants of something greater, but only Steve behaves like a capable, creative being. This leads to one of the most important theories in Minecraft's hidden lore, that Steve exists as part of a repeating cycle, a pattern of rise, fall, and rebirth, and that he may be the final link to an ancient civilization that once ruled all dimensions. Let's start with the ruins. Across the overworld, players find abandoned temples, mineshafts, and ruined portals. In the Nether, there are fortresses and bastions. In the End, massive cities and floating ships. These are not natural structures. They were clearly built by someone who had redstone knowledge, brewing abilities, dimensional access, and even flight. The presence of these structures in every dimension suggests that the ancient builders had complete control over Minecraft's universe. But they're all gone. Their cities are empty. Their portals are broken. Their writings are lost. The only one left who can even understand or use these tools is Steve. This has led to the theory that Steve is either the last member of the ancient builders or a recreated version of them, either a clone, a construct, or a conscious being restored by a system built to preserve civilization. In this theory, the world goes through cycles. A civilization rises, expands, builds massive structures, explores all dimensions, then collapses for unknown reasons: war, magic, environmental disaster, corruption. After the fall, the world resets. Villagers are left behind in their simplest form. Hostile mobs rise from the ruins. The End is overtaken by the dragon. But then, a new player, Steve, appears. Not randomly, but as part of the reset process. Steve is the restart button, the clean slate. He begins again, alone, and has to rebuild from nothing. This fits with how the game is played. Every new world spawns Steve with no tools, no memories, no guidance. He must survive the night, build shelter, mine, craft, and eventually rediscover what the builders once knew. He creates potions, opens portals, visits the Nether and the End. By the end of the game, Steve has done everything the ancient builders did, only he did it alone, with no help, and with no record of the past. This makes Steve not just a player, but a reclaimer, someone whose purpose is to restart civilization after each collapse. His ability to respawn supports this theory. He cannot die permanently. No matter what happens, he returns over and over until he succeeds. In other words, he's part of a loop. There is also evidence in the mechanics. In single-player Minecraft, the world revolves around Steve. Time stops when he sleeps. The Ender Dragon only spawns if he enters the End. Raids only trigger when he interacts with villagers. This implies Steve is not just part of the world, he activates it. Without him, time and events pause. This fits with the idea that Steve is more than a person. He is a system rebooting the simulation of civilization. Some interpretations go further, suggesting that Steve may be a construct, either artificial or magical, designed by the ancient builders themselves. In this version of the theory, the builders, realizing their civilization was doomed, created a last backup: Steve, a being with the strength to mine, craft, fight, and explore, able to rebuild everything from the ground up. His memory was wiped, so he wouldn't carry the same flaws as his creators. His code, or soul, is bound to the rules of the world: break, build, survive, and respawn. He is not a god, but a tool of restoration. The End poem provides further support. After defeating the Ender Dragon, a long poetic message appears, referring to the player as a spirit watching the world through Steve. It says the player has been asleep, dreaming the world into existence. It talks about knowledge, time, and cycles. One line says, "Sometimes the player believed it was part of a story. Sometimes it believed it was the god." This suggests that Steve is more than just a physical character. He is the link between the world and its observer. This matches the theory that Steve is part of a repeating narrative, one where the player always returns, always starts over, always builds again. Other details also support the cycle idea. Villagers have simplified intelligence and no historical memory. They behave like survivors who have lived through a collapse and lost their culture. Ruined portals show that people once traveled across dimensions but no longer can. End cities contain treasures and flight gear, but no pilots. Every structure feels like a snapshot frozen in time, left behind mid-progress. Steve, by exploring them and reactivating their functions, restarts what they once had. He brews potions, enchants tools, and flies again using elytra. He doesn't innovate, he rediscovers. In some variations of the cycle theory, Steve isn't alone in repeating the loop. Endermen, villagers, and even the mobs may be leftovers from previous versions. Endermen, especially, appear to have memory fragments. They build nothing now, but they carry blocks, avoid water, and teleport like someone trying to escape. Their scattered behavior might be what's left after their own reset. Villagers may have once been smarter, but after generations of survival, only their basic farming and trading instincts remain. So what is Steve's place in the cycle? He is the restart. He is the one who comes after the fall. He is not an invader, but a reclaimer. Everything he finds was left by those who came before, and everything he builds may one day be left for someone else. The game never confirms any of this directly, but the way it's designed points in this direction. You never see another Steve. You never hear a voice. You never read a history book. All you have are the ruins, your own abilities, and a silent world waiting to be rebuilt. Minecraft presents a world that is clearly ancient, clearly broken, but strangely ready for a new beginning. Steve arrives in the center of that world. He doesn't just survive it, he unlocks it. Whether he's a remnant, a clone, a spirit, or a fail-safe system, Steve's role is clear: to restart the world, explore the past, and restore what was lost again and again. From the very first block punch to the final leap into the end portal, one question quietly follows everything the player does in Minecraft. Who, or what, is Steve really? He is the first face you see, the one who wakes up alone in a mysterious, ancient world full of ruins, monsters, and strange technology. But unlike everything else in the game, Steve has no origin, no clear purpose, no written past. He just exists, capable of things no other creature in Minecraft can do. Stronger than the mobs, smarter than the villagers, more determined than the Endermen, able to cross dimensions, master every system, and even return from death. Throughout this entire world, only Steve can rebuild civilization from the ground up. But how? And why? Let's begin with what we know from the mechanics and lore clues. Steve is functionally immortal. He can respawn endlessly, carry thousands of kilograms of material, punch trees into logs with his bare hands, and conquer threats far beyond the ability of any other entity. He learns rapidly. He builds structures. He tames animals. He understands complex systems like enchantments, redstone, and brewing, all without help. These aren't normal human traits. They suggest either supernatural ability, ancient programming, or both. This points to three main theories about Steve's identity, each supported by clues left in the world. The first theory is that Steve is a survivor of the ancient builders, a civilization that once spanned every dimension. This theory is supported by the abandoned strongholds, ruined portals, mine shafts, and end cities, all signs of intelligent life long gone. In this theory, Steve is the last of his kind, waking up in a forgotten world. He doesn't remember what happened, but his instincts and skills remain. His journey is one of rediscovery, following the trail of the builders, reactivating old systems, and learning again how to survive and thrive. His silence could represent memory loss or trauma, or perhaps there's simply no one left to talk to. The second theory is that Steve is a creation, not a natural being, but a designed entity, maybe a golem, clone, or artificial mind created by the builders themselves. This fits with his inhuman strength, ability to respawn, and perfect knowledge of every crafting recipe. If the world is caught in a repeating cycle of collapse and rebirth, Steve may be a programmed solution, an entity designed to survive the fall of civilization and rebuild it from scratch. His lack of emotion, voice, and history could be by design, to keep him focused on the mission. Every time the world resets, Steve reawakens, ready to begin again. The third theory is more philosophical, that Steve is the player's avatar, a blank slate made to reflect us. In this theory, Steve doesn't exist in the world of Minecraft until the player enters. He is not part of the simulation. He is the disruption to it. The end poem supports this idea. It describes the player as a being of thought and dreams, watching the world through Steve's eyes. It even says, "The player is you." Steve may not be a character at all, but a vessel, something the world sees you through. The mobs respond to him not because of who he is, but because he represents change. He is the spark of intelligence in a silent world. Of course, all three of these theories could be true in some way. Steve could be a remnant of a forgotten race, preserved by ancient magic or technology, now driven by the will of a real-world player. Or maybe none of these are entirely correct. Minecraft never confirms a single narrative. That's part of its genius. It allows you to explore not only the game's world, but also its mysteries. Every unanswered question, why is Steve alone? Who built the strongholds? Why do Endermen act strangely? Invites you to think, explore, and imagine. And in doing so, you become part of the story. So, who or what is Steve really? He's a builder, a survivor, a traveler, a symbol of rebirth. Maybe he's a backup of the old world. Maybe he's the beginning of the new one. Maybe he's a god. Or maybe he's just a person, waking up in a broken world, doing his best to fix it. In a game without dialogue, narration, or cutscenes, Steve tells a story just by being there, mining, crafting, fighting, and creating. He is the answer to the question, what comes after the end? And maybe that's the point. Steve doesn't need a backstory to be meaningful. His actions are his story. In every world, on every server, in every version, he starts from nothing and builds something. That is what makes him so powerful. Not just his strength, or his tools, or his knowledge, but his purpose. He never gives up. He never disappears. As long as there is a world to rebuild, Steve will be there. And so the story ends, not with a final battle, but with quiet understanding. You've seen the ruins. You've explored the cycle. You've met the Endermen, the villagers, the dragons, and the machines. But through it all, only one figure remains constant. Silent, alone, capable of everything. Steve. Good night.